Quest for the Stone by Bernard Trevisan. Part 2nd. In which are described the huge labors of the author, and the great expenses with the singular operations from the beginning to the end, and truly with the most incontrovertibly success. When I first undertook this work, the Book of Raises fell into my hands, in which indeed I labored 4 years and expended 800 crowns, also in Geber's books I threw away more than 2,000. Many impostors soliciting and inducing me thereto, that they might exhaust my substance. In this manner I inspected the books of Archelaus for 3 years, in which I operated along with a certain monk, and in the books of Rupasissa and Jo. de Sacrobosco by means of aquae vitae. In that labor I lost other 300 crowns. 12 or 15 years having been consumed in this manner, and innumerable monies, without benefit, after the experiments of many received ones, it dissolving and congealing common, ammoniacal, pineal, saracen, and metallic salts, then more than 100 times calcining them in the space of 2 years. Also in alums of all kinds, in marcasites, blood, hair, urine, human dung and semen, animals and vegetables, in copras, vitriols, soot, eggs. By separation of the elements in an athanor by the alembic, and the pelican, by circulation, boiling, reverberation, ascension, dissension, fusion, ignition, elementation, rectification, evaporation, conjunction, elevation, subtilation, and commiction, and other infinite regimens of sophistications, to which I stuck for 12 years, having attained 38 years of age, still insisting upon extractions of the mercuries from herbs and animals. Thus had I uselessly dilapidated, as well by my own folly as by the seduction of impostors, about 6,000 crowns, so that I became almost despondent. But nevertheless in my prayers I never forgot to beseech God that he would deign to assist my endeavors. Afterwards I fell in with a certain magistrate of our country at the same time investigating, who endeavored to make the stone out of common salt, dissolving this in the air and congealing it in the sun, with many other processes too prolix for narration. In this work 1.5 years was spent in empty labor, because we did not operate upon the true substance. In vain we sought for it, in the above substance, although it is asserted for truth in the Codex Turbi. When therefore common salt could by no means be made to yield what we wished, and after even 5 to 10 repetitions of our labors appeared to demonstrate to us no change whatever of its natural properties, we gave up all further trials of it. Moreover we saw others dissolving in most strong waters the finest silver, copper and other metals, also argentum vivum in the same strong waters, which was put aside in a separate vessel, and at length mixing all the solutions of that description, after suffering them to rest for 12 entire months, asserting that this permixtion was the conjunction of the spirit and body. They placed the vessel of this description upon hot ashes until the 3rd part of the water was evaporated. They exposed the residue to the rays of the sun, thinking that crystalline concretions would thence be procreated, white, congealed and leakable, able to extract from the white metal a white tincture, and from the red metal, the red tincture, but of 22 phials half full of this liquor they gave 3 to us. We all waited for the event of the generation of the said concretions in the bottoms of the vessels for 5 years, but in vain. Indeed, as is said in the Tubba, there is no need of anything extraneous for that stone, for it is manufactured by itself in its own metallic matter. At that time I had completed the 46th year of my age when I attempted the stone along with a learned monk called Gottfried Lepier, as had been premeditated by him. We knew that every other work than the stone was vain and frustraneous, therefore we attempted to fabricate it in the following manner, viz. We bought 2,000 hens' eggs, which we separated by boiling them hard in water, calcining the shells to the utmost whiteness. But we allowed the yolks and the whites, each by itself, to putrefy in horse dung, and afterwards we distilled 30 times into a white water and a red oil separately, with many other useless processes, which we shall not now relate. In this vain work 2.5 years were also spent without utility and at a very great expense, which being finished we would have deserted the pursuit entirely if we had not been supported by new hopes, we began again to investigate the sublimation of spirits, the distillations of strong waters, the separation of the elements, various structures of furnaces and fires, in which we were occupied 8 years. A certain other learned theologian Prothonotary of Berg then joined us, with whom also we tried to get the stone, and by whose investigation we thought to procure it from vitriol alone. And in the first place we distilled the acetum acerrimum 8 times, in which we dissolved and abstracted vitriol called calcined. Again we abstracted the infusion 10 and 5 times every day for the space of 2 months, on account of the very vehement smell of which I labored under a quartan fever 14 months. We permitted the mixture to rest for this whole year, but with no fruit, because it was extraneous matter. It was afterwards told us by a certain learned man, confessor to the emperor, whose name was Magister Henricus, that he did most certainly possess and retain the mastery of the stone. In order therefore that we might attain the knowledge of it, it became necessary for the greatest mediation of friendship, and besides an expense of more than 200 crowns, before he could render it familiar to us. He operated in the following manner. He made a paste of silver and mercury in oil of olives, boiling it at the same time on a slow fire in a very well luted pelican and incorporating it with a wooden spatula. But the matter could never be mixed into one body, even in the space of 2 months. At length, having placed this matter into another phial, at the same time strongly luted and sealed, we buried it all together in hot ashes, and we kept up the fire around it, thinking that the mercurium would be converted into argentum optimum in the course of 15 or 21 days by virtue of the sulphureous body. The decoction being taken out of the phial, was placed upon a test with lead, and by a very violent fire was all melted into one mass, which being revived by means of a piece of burning charcoal, we expected to have found our silver increased 1/3 part in its weight. For my own part, one gave 10 marks of silver, others 32 marks, from which we thought to have received 130 marks. But it happened other ways, since my companions only received 12 out of their marks, and I got 4 from my 10. Wherefore, by believing that this father confessor had the secret, I was made poorer by 40 crowns, and in great grief I abstained for 2 months. And that I might entirely relinquish the work, my relations tormented and teased me daily, so that I could neither eat nor drink, and was reduced to such an emaciated condition that every body thought that I had received some deadly poison. Nevertheless, I speedily became 1,000 times more inflamed than ever, because I was ashamed of having spent my time so uselessly. I was then in my 58th year. The cause of all my errors, alas, was this alone, that wandering astray I never operated in the congruous matter. We saw innumerable persons operating in amalgamations and multiplications at the white and red, in matter of every kind which can be thought of, by very great labors and so great perseverance that greater cannot be used. But we never hitherto saw silver enriched 1/3 part or even in the least degree. Nevertheless, we saw infinite dealbations and rubifications, and many sophistications received in various and different regions, such as Rome, Navarre, Scotland, Turkey, Greece, Alexandria, Barbary, Persia, Messina, Rhodes, France, Spain, the Holy Land, and in neighboring regions, in Italy, Germany, England, and almost round all the world. We have as yet seen nobody in these places but such as were laboring in sophistic matters, such as herbs, vegetables, animals, plants, minerals, stones, salts, alums, strong waters, by distillations, separations of elements, sublimations, calcinations, congelations of argentum vivum, by means of herbs, stones, waters, oils, fumes, fires, and even with extraneous vessels. But never found any body operating upon congruous material substances. We found some in their regions who knew the method and the secret of making the stone, but we could never attain their familiar confidence. Wherefore, here and there running about, investigating and experimenting, I had already consumed 10,300 golden crowns. I had also sold a certain property which was worth 8,000 florins German money, so that I fell into disgrace with all my relations. Because I was reduced to poverty and very little money now remained to me, and I was then 62 years old and upwards. Nevertheless, although ruined in my circumstances by so many adversities, yet I was not wearied in my mind so as to desist from my design, but rather confiding in the mercy of God. Never failing in goodwill to diligent men, leaving my country in great disgrace, I went to roads unknown to all mankind, in order to console my afflictions. One day, I had heard of a certain man, very religious and of a great name. There was a rumor that he possessed the stone so much sought after, with whom I entered into friendship at a very great expense. I borrowed from a person who knew my relations very well, 8,000 florins. The formula of his labor was this. He placed in horse dung gold and silver very well refined and foliated, mixed with 4 parts of sublimated mercury, which had stood 11 months in the dung. He distilled the water from it with a most vehement fire. We calcined the earthy residue at the bottom of the vessel in a violent fire per se, but we distilled the water again 6 times. With each distillation we joined the earth subsiding from the first, and repeated the distillation so often that no more residue was deposited. The earth being triturated and placed in an urinal, we sprinkled them by degrees, but in vain did we attempt with great labor to make them imbibe their own water. Yet we could never mix them because the water always swam above the earth. Although we kept it in continued heat for the space of 7 months, there was no conjunction, no alteration. The fire being even increased, which having been found frivolous, and having spent 3 years upon it, and thrown away 500 crowns, we gave up the work. That religious man had most excellent chemical books such as Rosarius Magnus, Arnaldus de Villanova, the Book of the Words of Mary the Prophetess, in which finally I began to study and abstained from the work 8 years. For the first time I ascertained by evident philosophical reasons, that whatever I had done before were only foolish and useless labors. Particularly when I considered the following saying of great truth in the Codex: Nature is not amended unless in its own proper nature, nature delights in her own nature, nature conquers nature, and nature retains nature. After having studied this book I was brought out of all my sophistications and erroneous labors. I therefore resolved to study first rather than begin to operate again at a great expense and without fruit. Many nights did I pass without sleep assiduously arguing with myself and concluding in this opinion. What occasion is there that I should seek this art from mankind, in vain tormenting myself in this manner? If they do know the art they will never reveal it. If they do not know it, in vain do I meddle with them, and endeavor to gain their confidence and friendship at a great expense. I considered strongly in what places of the book chiefly concurred in the same meaning, thinking that there the truth lay concealed which cannot exist in many meanings, but in one alone. In this manner the truth became obvious to me, and what I so anxiously sought after was contained in one point. Although one calls it by one name and another by another, yet it is the same substance. The sole error is committed in the diversity of words and not in the concordances. Therefore, my children, I have written this book for your sakes, lest you should despond or fail in your minds from being so miserably led astray as I was. Moreover, it is always the safest way to learn from others' misfortunes. I truly believe that those men who have written figuratively and parabolically about hair, urine, blood, sperms, herbs, vegetables, animals, plants, mineral stones, as salts, alums, copras, atramenta, vitriols, boraxes, magnesia, had never operated at all upon these matters, but described them out of sheer cruelty. And I am very sorry indeed, of the calamities and miseries of those unfortunate people, who have been led into such labyrinths by impostors. Whoever therefore is inclined to repose confidence in me will not do so without very great advantage, as my sole labor will be to instruct others. Whoever will not believe me will soon experience what fatality attends the bad examples of others. Shun the sophistications alchemists by all means, and all those who give their faith to them. For if the reading of true books should teach you any good, they endeavor to carry you off by false oaths and asseverations, all to lead you off from the true road. Having nothing to excuse their errors but this, I have often made it, say they, but at present I do not possess that which is requisite for it, or they say, if such and such things are added. Unless you shun more strongly than the plague those impostors and scoundrels, you will never make an good of this art. Before I perfected this work by an experiment, I learned the art for 2 years from books. Nevertheless, when detestable men and damnable thieves of that description came to me, they asserted with solemn oaths that the most manifest errors were true experiments. However, they had long ago made me almost mad on account of the great expense to which I had been put. I was never confirmed in my own good opinions until I had entirely given up the company of such fellows, and proceeded most vigilantly in my own studies on that subject. Whoever desires to learn the true art will associate with wise men, that is to say, he will read their books and not those of impostors, although they speak in obscure language.